Coming live from the Bleacher Report app, I am Trevor McCue, senior editor of Maize and Blue Review, here with the Intel insider, publisher, and owner of Maize and Blue Review, Mr. Josh Henschke. Buddy, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. This is an excellent opportunity to, open and broaden our horizons. This is an excellent opportunity. Really appreciative for everyone at Bleacher Report for giving us this platform to, tell who we are. My dog's excited. I mean, everyone's fired up. Everyone is fired up.
Yeah, if somebody asks me if I want to talk about Michigan football in any avenue, I will say yes. Especially right now, we are so close to the season. Obviously, Big Ten Media Days just happened. Fall camp is right around the corner. So that's what we're talking about today. The theme of the offseason and the theme of Media Days has been Natty or bust for the Michigan Wolverines. And is it going to happen this year? Right. That was the conversation at Media Days. And we're going to talk about Harbaugh and some of the players' comments and why we think this is the year that Michigan is going to get over the hump. So let's get right into it. Obviously, the Media Days were this week. In 2021, Michigan kind of had to defend their position of talking about beating Ohio State, even though they hadn't come close to doing it. In 2022, it was like, okay, you guys did it. You lost Aiden Hutchinson. Like, is this going to be a fluke? Or are you going to do it again? Now, they were voted the favorites to win the Big Ten by the Big Ten media during the Media Days, and they're going to be a top 4 team heading into the season. So I guess let's just start with Natty or bust. Is that really what it is? Is it Natty or bust? And do you think Michigan's got the team to do it this year?
Yeah, it's an interesting, I guess, dichotomy, if that's what you want to call it. I think there are ways to have a successful season without winning a national title. I mean, you could consider the last 2 seasons successful for Michigan, even though it ended the way it did in the semifinal. But I think, we're at the point now where, Michigan has to, I guess, get over that hump. This is kind of the last 2 years have been about Michigan getting over the hump, right? It's about, beating Michigan State. It's about, beating Ohio State. And so they've done both. They've made it to the college football playoff 2 years in a row. They got humbled by Georgia, which, a lot of teams have gotten humbled by Georgia in the past. And
I don't think anybody felt bad about that.
Right.
That was arguably one of the best defenses in college football history.
Yeah, and I think...
But 2022 is different.
Right. And I think in 2021, Michigan, and they've been pretty open about saying this, that they were kind of just happy to be there.
Yeah.
That hey, we did all these great things. Everything is awesome. We got there. But now in 2022, whatever the mindset was going into that game, shouldn't be the next mindset coming into 2023. I mean, they need to get over the hump now. And yeah, I mean, the only thing realistically left for Michigan to do is to, win the semifinal and get to the national championship game. So do they have the roster to do it? Absolutely they do. Do they have what it takes to beat Georgia? I mean, we'll ultimately see. I think the strongest point Michigan has going for it right now is that, out of all these big time schools, JJ McCarthy is the only guy that has experience coming back. Ohio State's breaking in a new quarterback. Georgia's breaking in a new quarterback. Alabama's breaking in a new quarterback. And, another team that you could arguably say that they'll make the semifinals, USC, and they have Caleb Williams. So the stars aren't yet aligned because obviously you got to win all your games. But, there's a reason why all these guys decided to come back. There's a reason why there's so much left on the table and there's unfinished business by what Blake Corum says. So
I'll say that's the term they keep talking about.
Right.
Unfinished business, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, losing to TCU, a game everyone thought you were going to win, you were favored. They talked a lot of smack going into that game. They were very confident, right? I think that left a really bad taste. I'd argue the next step is just winning a playoff game and then getting to the title game, right? And I think if they were to do that and lose the national championship, it would obviously feel terrible in that moment. I think that's the obvious next step. But you're right. it might not ever line up this good for Michigan again in terms of the amount of returning production they have, the teams above them replacing quarterbacks, coordinators. We talked about Ohio State. It doesn't get talked about a lot. Kevin Wilson's gone. They're going to give Brian Hartline the chance to be the OC. Todd Monken left Georgia. That's a big deal, right? So things are lining up for Michigan, and they've just got to do it. One thing that could be a potential distraction that we knew was going to come up at Big Ten Media Days, and we knew the answer was going to be, I can't talk about it, was the potential suspension of Jim Harbaugh for what we're going to call NCAA recruiting potential violations. But that's not what it is, right? The issue, they had 4 level 2 violations. The issue the NCAA has is they feel like Jim Harbaugh lied. And you and I cover Jim Harbaugh, have talked with Jim Harbaugh, have talked to players, coaches, players' parents. The one thing you can call Jim weird and different, whatever else, the one thing you can't call him is a liar. That man believes in his word more than anyone I know. I don't think he knows how to lie. It was sometime to his detriment. 2021, the NFL coaching rumors. He's telling recruits, players outright, oh yeah, I'm looking. If the right opportunity comes, I'm going to go. Right. So he's not just going to admit to lying. He's not going to do it. He really doesn't think he did. And I thought this quote that he said during the media days was interesting. I'm with you. I would love to lay it all out there. Nothing to be ashamed of, but now is not the time. That's about all there is to say about that. So he clearly feels like he has something to say, and maybe he will at someday. But for right now, is this a distraction? Is this going to affect Michigan the first 4 games of the season, or potentially after, when it comes to like getting in rhythm or whatever it might be, if Jim Harbaugh's not around for potentially up to 4 games?
Yeah. If you take what these players are saying at Big Ten Media Days at face value, then, it's not going to impact them, at least from game days. I mean, I've been able to confirm myself that, Harbaugh is going to be able to coach the team during the week, during his suspension.
That's a big deal. Yeah. If it's just game day versus practice. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of the talk, especially from Mike Sainristil, was like, hey, we're just going to, do whatever happens. We're going to get these guys together and we're going to make sure there's no drop off, and we're just going to pretend like Harbaugh is right there on the sidelines coaching. So, I think, do I think it's a distraction? Not really. I mean, maybe right now it is because there's no football going on. I mean, we're talking about a fall camp opening up next week. So, and Harbaugh's going to be there. So I think it would be a distraction if this stuff leaked into the season. I think it's smart for everyone involved to get this done. Whether it's 4 games, whether it's 2 games, 3 games, 1 game, whatever, it just needs to get done. That would be the bigger distraction, is letting this seep into the season.
And let's be honest, I don't want to put the tinfoil hat on or anything, but Michigan didn't want this news out right before Big Ten Media Days, right? Yeah. So somebody wanted Jim Harbaugh to have that pressure on him, but I'm with you. Yeah, it's just got to get done at this point. I like the way they're answering it. You're right. Sainer still said, whether he's with us those 4 games or not, we're going to play as if he was right there coaching us. I think had this happened in previous years, it would have been a bigger deal. But because of the coaching staff Harbaugh has built, what this program has become the last couple of years, it's kind of a well-oiled machine at this point. We've already talked about Harbaugh spending more time away with his family, and Sharon Moore is basically like a head coach when Harbaugh's not there. Mike Hart. I mean, the players say this, like they view them like head coaches. So I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. I think just because of what's happened the last couple of years, where the team is today is why I don't think it's going to have an impact. And if they just keep saying we have nothing to say about it, then people are going to not ask about it, and it shouldn't be a distraction. So we don't know if Harbaugh will be there the first 4 games or not, but we do know Blake Corum will be. He kind of just slipped out a huge bomb during media days and said, oh yeah, I've been cleared. I'm ready for camp. Right. So we knew he's been, practicing and doing drills. He said he was at 98%. The last 2% was getting contact, getting hit. And it sounds like from the start of camp, he's going to be allowed to do that. So if Blake Corum's back, he's healthy. He's talked about being stronger and faster, which sounds crazy, but we've seen that in the past. Like Ronnie Bell last year, these guys bounced back even better than before. So Blake Corum's ready to go. What is the ceiling for a 2023 Blake Corum that is arguably stronger and faster than he was last year?
Yeah, that one's a tough question to answer because, Donovan Edwards is also there. You know, it's excuse me, last year. I mean, you know, you're arguably talking about if Blake Corum didn't get hurt, you know, you're talking about possibly a Heisman level type of year.
He would have at least been at New York.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So this year, what does that ceiling look like when you've got a guy like Donovan Edwards, who's also going to command plenty of rushes himself? I don't know, because I don't think Michigan is at the point now where they want to rely too much on Corum. You know, I don't think you're going to see him get, you know, 30 carries a game. I mean, he was averaging around, you know, 25 carries a game.
In Big Ten play, yeah. He had at least 25 carries in every game except for Illinois, where he got hurt before the end of the half. Right. And he had 18 carries in the first half against Illinois.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's tough to see a scenario of what a ceiling looks like, you know, because again, maybe, you know, Donovan Edwards gets hurt again or something, or there's something that happens to the depth chart, you know, that kind of opens up Blake Corum's reliance on getting him touches. But, you know, a ceiling for Corum is kind of difficult to really examine because, yeah, we don't really know what the split is going to look like because, you know, Edwards is definitely going to get involved.
Well, let me put it this way then. What does Blake Corum need to do for Michigan to win the national championship? Because I not to make excuses, but against TCU, the best threat against a 3-3-5 defense is running back screens, running backs in the flat, tight ends in the flat, right? And you have no Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards with a broken hand who can't catch, and then Luke Schoonmaker, who got hurt on a big play where he was able to find a gap in the 3-3-5 defense. So maybe Michigan wins that game. I think they would. I'll just say it. I think they would have won if they had Blake Corum. And then, I don't know, we're in the same boat. Georgia's so good. I'm not going to try and pretend I know Michigan would have beat Georgia, right? But you're in the championship game. So does Blake Corum need to be what he was last year for them to be in the national championship? Or do you just need a healthy Corum and Edwards to be able to feel good about your running game at the end of the season, as good as you did, say, in the middle of the year where you had over 400 yards against Penn State?
Right. Yeah, I think you just need both of them healthy. I mean, they're two.
It's that simple, yeah.
Yeah, we're not talking about two of the same kind of wide receiver, or running backs. I mean, Donovan can be a wide receiver. You know, that's kind of how dynamic he really is. So I guess, I mean, yeah, you'd like to see Corum do what he did last year and continue that on. But again, which goes back to our previous argument, is he going to get 25 carries a game? No, he's probably not. So ideally, you'd like to see both a healthy Corum and Edwards for the whole season. I mean, we're talking about Corum hasn't played against Ohio State in a big role ever. You know, he played. He was
dinged up in 21 too.
Yeah,
he had the big run, but he got caught because his ankle was
right
up. Yeah,
right. And, you know, that was the Hassan Haskins game. And then obviously last year,
Edwards was hurt too. Edwards has been hurt a ton too. That's a good. Yeah.
So we haven't really seen what they can do in these big games. So ideally, I think you'd like to have both guys healthy and available for you throughout the year, not just, you know, during these big games, for the whole extension of the year. Because ideally, if both guys are healthy, you're kind of taking the load off each guy, and it kind of balances out the scales a bit. So, you know, you're less likely to get guys banged up. But yeah, at this point, I mean, yeah, you'd like to see Blake continue on his success, but at the same time, you also want him to play a full year. I think Michigan's chances of at least making a national title game are increased tenfold with a healthy Corum and a healthy Edwards.
Yeah, it's tough because you don't want to play scared. Like 2021, Ronnie Bell gets hurt on the punt return, and everyone's like, "Oh, what are you doing? You can't have him out there. He could, you know, that's so dumb." He can get hurt on any play. You want your best players playing in the spots where they help your team. Like, I remember when that happened, I was like, well, another guy used to return punts for Michigan named Charles Woodson, right? Like, if that's your best punt returner, that's who does it, right? So the same thing with Corum and Edwards. Yeah, you want to limit carries and take advantage of some depth you have this year that you didn't have last year, but like, to what end, right? I would say, yeah, we haven't seen Corum in these big games, right? But one guy we did see in big games last year, and I mean, he's the obvious X factor this year, and that's the quarterback. It's J.J. McCarthy, right? He's coming back now for his second year as starter. Last year, he's hurt throughout the offseason. He doesn't even start throwing until fall camp begins. Yep. So he's in a quarterback competition that he can't compete in, right? The whole element of that. And I think it took him until the end of the year to really kind of start clicking and feel like good about throwing again. That's not the case this year, right? Jim Harbaugh's praise of McCarthy was about as good as it can get at Big Ten Media Days, right? He said he's elite in every facet as an athlete, as he is throwing the ball, as a leader. You know, he compared him to Mahomes and Allen, not his talent. He's not saying that's what he's going to be, but in terms of just guys that do everything for your team on the field and off, and are leaders and always looking to be a teammate, right? So Michigan runs the ball. They always win running the ball. That's never going to change, okay? But is J.J. McCarthy going to be the difference when it comes to Natty or bust this year? If whatever happens with the running backs, is it J.J. that's got to go to the next level?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, you got to, you know, as much as, you know, having two healthy running backs are important, you know, this offense is going to live or die by McCarthy's arm too. I mean, as much as Michigan's been open about, you know, I guess expanding the passing game and kind of opening things up a little bit. I mean, we've heard that for probably like the last 3 years.
Forever.
And it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
At some point, it's got to happen. But I think in order for Michigan to get to that next level of, you know, hey, we're actually competing for national championships here, and we're not just, you know, happy to be here and our window is closing. I think to get to the next level, I think J.J. McCarthy needs to take his game to the next level. And I think he's had a full off season to get some chemistry with his wide receivers.
Yes.
Because I think that was the big thing for McCarthy last year, not having that spring and that entire off season to throw to his receivers and only having a month to gain some sort of chemistry with his receivers. I think that hindered him a little bit. And you could tell that multiple points, you know, the deep ball wasn't working. They were so close on a lot of plays. But, you know, I think that chemistry can take things to the next level. And do I think JJ has what it takes to do that? Yes. He's got all the talent in the world to do that. And again, I'm not saying he's a Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen type of quarterback, but
not too much pressure, kid. Just
exactly.
Got to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. That's all.
Right. That would be ridiculous for me to sit here and say he's got those tools. But I think he's got the tools to be a very good collegiate quarterback right now and a good quarterback for Michigan.
Yeah.
And with an opportunity to be great if, you know, the coaching staff puts him in a position to play to his strengths and be able to be creative and a guy that where you look at and go, oh no, JJ, what are you doing? And then it turns out to be like a 45-yard completion. You're like, all right, never mind, continue on. You know, that's just that's the JJ McCarthy experience in a nutshell in the early stages here. But I think he's got the capability to take Michigan to the next level. And I think in order to do that, JJ McCarthy has to evolve with Michigan in order to get to that next step.
I mean, two big things. One, we saw, I think, against TCU, something for anyone that's followed Michigan. I've never seen them have a quarterback like that keeps them in games, right? Yes, the 2 pick sixes were obviously monsterable and were deciding factors in the game, right. But he fought them back and made big throws and big plays. And Michigan's never had a quarterback like that always keeps you in the game. And I don't think we've talked about this a little bit, and you just touched on it. The deep ball and some of the inaccuracies and things not clicking there. Last year it was Andrell Anthony. Arguably this year it could be Darius Clemens. Seems like he's potentially going to be in that kind of deep man role. Ronnie Bell's gone, but Tyler Morris, his old high school receiver, looks like he's going to be in that role. Right. So if there's some good continuity there, and there's literally the exact same offense with just better execution, that takes JJ up to the next level alone, right? Yeah. 1 of 8 against Maryland on throws 20 yards or more.
Yeah.
Right. Andrell Anthony had more drops than catches.
Yeah.
Right. Like
that. There are a couple of tough drops.
Yeah. And as good as Ronnie Bell was, he's not a number one Big Ten receiver. He had 90 something targets, but he had the lowest catch and traffic rate in all of the Big Ten last year. Right. So if the receivers can do more for JJ, he can execute better, still control the ball like he did in the early part of the year. Right. He threw more interceptions in the last couple of games than he did the whole year. So still hold on to the ball. Still make those creative plays you do, execute a little better. I think he gets them there. I agree 100%. So we know JJ is the starting quarterback. We know Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. I mean, this roster's full of who we know is starting because of so much returning production.
Well, and the funny thing is too, though, when you're talking about evolving the passing game, if about 50% of those drops or missed passes were completed, we're talking about an evolved passing game for Michigan. I mean,
3,500 yards. You're adding another 5 or 6 touchdowns, literally.
Right. And I think that's just the big thing is just the execution. I mean, I know we've talked about, we've made fun of in the past that, is this the year that Michigan's going to open up the passing game? But if Michigan would have executed on 50%, just 50% of those long balls and drops, it's a completely different passing offense. I mean, I don't think the season changes. Because at the end of the year, especially against Ohio State, they executed, and look what happened. They won by a lot. And so, again, I mean, I don't think the overall arc of how the year ended would have changed, but I think we'd be talking with a lot more confidence about Michigan's passing game if just even 50% of the execution was done.
And it's just simple math. You would have more passing yards and plays, and you'd have less running plays because those plays were successful. So I'm with you 100%. But so the other piece of the depth chart where there are some question marks, I think the two most obvious ones, offensive line, just because of how many guys they are. We've heard 16 deep. It's basically come down to 10. There's 10 dudes that could literally start for the offensive line. And then the cornerback 2 position. So I'm going to start with cornerback 2 because that's been the hottest topic of the offseason. You and I have theorized all offseason that Mike Sainer still is arguably the CB2 because he's the second best corner. Right. Him, Will Johnson, Rod Moore, these guys can rotate nickel outside, etc. But Harbaugh, which he's done more often than in the past, mentioned 3 dudes that he thinks are leading to eventually earn that CB2 role, which this position battle is going to bleed into the season. There's no doubt. But he once again led with Amorian Walker. He has doubled and tripled down on, he thinks Amorian Walker is going to be a star, the converted wide receiver. Jaden McBurrows, big physical corner who had to miss last season due to an injury, but seems like an obvious, if he's healthy, obvious guy you could plug in there. And then, of course, now UMass transfer Josh Wallace, 4 years of experience starting, 2 years as a captain. Mike Sainer still said he's probably the guy to look out for. So how do you see this cornerback battle going through fall camp and then bleeding into the season? And then is this something that could be a problem, right? They had DJ Turner, Will Johnson, Jamon Green, and Sainer still last year. Is the guy there that's going to rise and make sure that the depth in the secondary isn't something that costs them a national championship?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think Michigan's best case scenario is if Josh Wallace turns out to be a guy that you can't take out of games. I think that's they're one of their best case scenarios because you're talking about an experienced guy who's seen and played a lot of football, is a leader. I think ultimately you want Amorian Walker to take that role. Perhaps maybe there's a little bit extra pressure on him because of the coaches of what they've been saying, but maybe that's on purpose. Maybe that's, hey, we want to put pressure on you so you can perform and pressure.
He's got the talent. He just needs to know it, right?
Yeah.
Feel comfortable and consistent. So whatever they got to do to motivate him, I could see that.
Right. And that's the big thing with depth at corner is that, they've got talent there outside of Sainer still and Josh Wallace, who've played a significant amount of football. There's guys who haven't really played much football. Amorian Walker, Cody Jones, there's so many guys, Jair Hill, obviously a freshman coming in, and I'm trumpeting the Jair Hill.
Had to get him in there.
Yeah, I know. I can't
He's
go.
the president of the Jair Hill fan club.
Yeah, I can't go, a podcast when we talk about cornerbacks without discussing Jair Hill. But, the Michigan has options there. It just needs to find a guy who can handle the pressure. And, maybe that's Mike Sanger still for the first part of the year, because there's going to be shuffling. There'll be occasions where you see Will Johnson play the nickel and play, all over the field. So we'll see ultimately how it turns out. I think Michigan's best case scenario is that if Amorion Walker takes hold of CB2, then that's great. But if a guy like Josh Wallace,
a 6'4" corner across
right,
Wisconsin,
and
that's not a bad
and if
thing.
Josh Wallace takes a year, takes this year and it performs very well, I think that's a huge hit for the transfer portal for Michigan, and it allows a guy for a Walker to come in and play in sparse cleanup minutes, essentially, where you can kind of get his experience, but not necessarily a guy that gets thrown at in clutch situations. So we'll see. I mean, there's still a long time from now until week 1. For sure.
I don't know who's going to rise from that group, but I don't know that I care. They have enough players with talent that somebody's going to figure it out.
Yep.
And it won't be a problem. Or this defense is deep enough at every other position that if they have to adjust their scheme, it's called an amoeba defense for a reason, right? Yep. They've got versatile players all over the field. So if they got to start playing more linebackers, more safeties, or something to alleviate the concerns at secondary, I think they'll make that move. And then the offensive line is a similar but different situation. I mean, they don't know who's starting in a couple spots, but not because of a talent issue. It's because there's too many good players, right? Yeah. So they're going to figure that out. They're going to have arguably the best offensive line in football again for the 3rd year in a row. We saw, Michigan tight end now working for the Big Ten Network, Jake Butt, said that the second unit would probably be better than 2/3 of the offensive lines in college football, right? Just crazy. So obviously, just real quick, the offensive line, Zach Zinter and Trevor Keegan return. Those are your 2 guards. That's a monster addition. Those are both day 2 NFL draft picks, right? Yeah. At center, Harbaugh said we've got 2 starters with Drake Nugent, the transfer from Stanford. Some people think he's got Olu potential, and Greg Crippen, who's just kept his head down and grinded, man.
Yeah.
Right. He and props to him. And he's arguably leading for that spot right now because Nugent was out. My question is tackles. I think that's a big deal. Carson Barnhart came and took the job at right tackle from Trent Jones last year. He's arguably the favorite for left tackle right now because Arizona State transfer Ladarius Henderson didn't come in until the summer. So those 2 are battling for left. I guess it just assumed at this point, if Henderson wins that job, Barnhart's probably sliding over to right.
Right.
Otherwise, Trent Jones is fighting for the right tackle spot. But again, I'm just thinking in terms of to win the national championship, I like Carson Barnhart a lot. I think Ladarius Henderson might have the higher ceiling athletically, whatever. Right. But this team wins behind its offensive line, and they're going to do that again this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, I think Carson Barnhart is now at the point where he's it's too difficult to leave him off the starting 5. I mean, the job he did taking over from Trente Jones when he was hurt, he was nothing short of fantastic. And that's a
plug and play.
Yeah. And that's a dude that earned it. So I think he's at the point now where he can't be off the field. Obviously in rotational situations and things like that, he can, but I think Michigan's best version of its offensive line, this is my personal opinion, Ladarius Henderson on the left, Carson Barnhart on the right. And, we'll kind of see between Greg Crippen and Nugent. Obviously, Nugent has the experience. An outlet like Pro Football Focus is extremely high on Nugent.
Yeah, they think he's a top 5 interior offensive
right.
lineman.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that bodes well. And if Nugent is the guy, I think, that bodes pretty well. But, we'll see. I mean, obviously, Crippen is the, center 1 heading into fall camp because of the fact that Nugent missed all of spring. But, I expect that depth chart to change rapidly once fall camp starts. But I don't think Michigan could go wrong either way because just considering of what the coaches are saying about Greg Crippen. But, maybe Nugent gives you that extra edge because of the experience. So ultimately we'll see. I mean, but I think Michigan, you got to love what they have at depth. I mean,
it's a great problem to have. They're absolutely loaded. Yeah. And injuries happen. We've been talking about injuries in the running back room. Obviously, JJ coming back from an injury, etc. Having guys like Trent Jones, who has started at right tackle, Giovanni El Hadi, excuse me, who would have easily been a starting guard and one of the best guards in college football this year if Keegan Zinter didn't return. Like, you've got those dudes. So offensive line is not going to be an issue. We like the talent at cornerback, somebody rising at CB2. We think Corum's coming back and healthy, and Michigan has a plan to use them. Don't think the Jim Harbaugh suspension is going to be an issue. So 67% of people polled on this podcast said Michigan's going to win the national championship in 2023. Josh Henschke, is Michigan football going to win the national championship in 2023? And I'm going to hold you to this.
Yeah, right. This is, I think, I think Michigan makes the national championship game.
That's where I'm at.
Yes, but I don't believe yet that they are capable of winning it because Georgia obviously exists. Yep. Yeah, they have quarterback questions, but it's a type of situation where this stuff eventually gets figured out. So maybe if they struggle enough to get through the SEC schedule unscathed and make it to a national championship game, then maybe there could be some belief that Michigan can win it all. But again, we haven't seen what Michigan looks like on the field, so I can't exactly say, hey, this is a for sure championship caliber team. But right now I say no, but I do think they'll make the national championship game this year.
I'm in the same boat. I think on paper they can. I want to see it on the field, and I just can't predict them to beat Georgia until they do it. So I am with you. And then even, at USC, like you brought up with Caleb Williams, something else clicks, whatever. That's where I'm at. I think they can. I think this is their best shot. We'll have to see, right? But the players have made it clear they're focused. They're at a day by day. They're done dreaming. That's what I think it was Chris Jenkins said, or Corum. I don't remember which one, but they're done dreaming. It's time to get to work. First game's East Carolina on September 2nd. Fall camp begins on August 2nd. So shout out Bleacher Report, allowing us to come on and have this show and discuss Michigan football with you. Again, my name is Trevor McCue, and this is Josh Henschke. We cover Michigan football, Michigan basketball, all Michigan athletics for Maize and Blue Review over at michigan.rivals.com. Find us over there. Otherwise, thanks again.